Welcome, everybody, to the Choices, Chances, Changes show with Georgie, Dickins, and Kit Tran, myself, where we explore the transformative power of personal and professional decisions. We are very lucky today to have one of my partner in crime, Kat Tatochenko, on the show with us, the CEO of Peer Data. Kat, Georgie, and I will talk a series of life transformational changes that we all go through. And Kat, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you, Kat. We are so excited to have you, and we are going to get to all. Well, we'd love to hear about the peer data story, and it's always interesting, I think, to go back to before it all began in the corporate world. And I would love to hear from you. What was your first ever job? Your first ever paid job? Let's go there. So this takes you.
Oh, first ever paid job. I'm going to go with the little one because I think it was a really defining moment. As a kid, I was fairly shy. You couldn't get me to talk in front of class. I was petrified anytime anybody called on me. And then at the ripe age of 13 and a half, I get plucked out of communist Russia and dropped into a suburb of Washington, D.C. And we have no money. We have nothing. We're starting from scratch. And somebody told me that, hey, your neighbors probably have dogs and you don't need to know English. So maybe walk around and ask if anybody needs their dogs walked after school. And the level of fear and trepidation I had knocking on my neighbors' doors, trying to say, hey, can I walk your dog? I think that was the first time I was forced to overcome the fear of asking for something. And it was great because my ultimate client, the dog, didn't require any English. And to this day, dogs, I think, are amazing, amazing animals. So I had odd jobs here and there, stuff that kids typically do, counselor, camp, babysitting, all that stuff. We ended up moving to New York City for my senior year of high school. And so I still needed a job. And I walked into a supermarket and, it's that thing of just walking up to somebody and saying, hey, I need a job. Right. And what I've realized, that was the first time where this drive for, I want to be the best at whatever task I'm doing, and figuring out what is the most optimal and efficient way to do whatever job I have to do was born. And one of the things, Kit found this out about me is I actually have a lot of PLU codes. So the codes that are on fruit memorized and still committed to memory, 30 years later. And my favorite one is bananas because, I have kids who buy bananas a lot. And I actually know the difference between the non-organic and organic. They put the 9 in front of the organic. But what really interested me with memorizing the PLU codes and the structure of them is how somebody created a system, right, for standardizing across the board the idea of a fruit type, right? Yeah. No matter where you go in this country, right, whether I am out in California, Utah, Florida, or New York, doesn't matter. A banana is always going to be 4011. And if you buy an organic one, they put a 9 in front of it. I was always fascinated by concepts of systems and optimizations, and the idea of how things are built, structured, organized. I think that was a childhood fascination. And it's interesting. I see it manifest itself differently in my kids because, if you ever have kids and you have more than one, you see how they can be so different, even though they come from the same family, and just seeing how their different fascinations are showing up in their life is an absolutely fascinating process to observe. So the dog was the first job, but the proper paycheck that I got on a weekly basis was a Sea Town in Rego Park, New York. I don't think it's around anymore.
Hold on, Kit, you're on mute at the moment.
Yeah. So amateur night. I'm saying every time I'm in the supermarket, I think about Kat. But actually, Kat, zoom back a little because you raised a good point that I don't think a lot of people are aware. Like I'm naturally introvert. I think Georgie, we talk about like us being introverts. But when I talk to when people talk to you, people are surprised to know that you are an introvert. Like talk about that journey of being an introvert to now be able to present and talk in front of a big crowd.
So that is, I had a very defining moment when that happened. So obviously coming to this country as an asylum seeker, really with nothing, right? It was a necessity. It was a hardship that really completely switched the way my mind worked, meaning I need this to survive. I need to develop the skill to survive. So that opened up the ability to actually go up to people and start asking for something. And I think it was the mindset of I can actually offer something to somebody else. So if I can help you, then it doesn't feel as scary. Mm-hmm. The public speaking and getting and talking in front of people has been something so difficult. And it wasn't until I was at college that got broken. So I am a math nerd. I love math. And when I was at university, again, needed money, but also wanted to get plugged in to the community more. I actually got a teaching assistant job for the intro calculus course. And we didn't have many undergrads who were actually doing that. The other thing was most of the math department at my school did not speak much English. And my name, definitely, my full name, definitely looks like I don't speak much English. So anyway, first day of class, I printed out and structured how I'm going to present and I'm walking up to a class and I am trembling. I am shaking. My palms are sweating. And I'm like, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if I can do this. And everybody's just sitting outside the room. And I'm coming into a room of my peers. And I'm like, how am I going to do this? How am I going to do this? And I go up to the front of a class and one of the kids asks, wait, are you the teacher? And I have this split second moment where I heard a voice like, why are you scared? These are the people who need this class to graduate. And some of them need to truly understand this because they're going to go on to do things like computer science and physics and other things. And some of them have to take this course to graduate and they're, English lit or fine arts majors. So they just need to pass the class. And guess what? You know how to do math.
Yeah.
You understand calculus inside and out. And you know how to explain stuff. And in that split second, I went from fear to I can help these people. Mm. And so I said, yes, I am. Everybody sit down. Which ones of you actually need to understand this? And which ones of you are here because you just need to graduate? And I told them that I was going to split them in half and I'm going to teach them differently. Because for you, I just need to teach you how to answer problems that are likely to be on the test. And for you, I have to teach the concepts. And I'm going to be wasting time if I'm trying to teach these people that and these people that. And that was the moment that kind of broke my fear of getting up in front of people and really speaking to them. And I think most of the time, as long as I can see how I can help somebody, that fear of being in front of people completely goes away. I am able to be of service to somebody else, most people don't think of data as a passionate type of area. The reality is I find a lot of beauty and importance in data and numbers, and I think the world is now coming around to seeing the importance of data in our everyday lives. I jokingly say, when I first started working, I worked at a company called DLJ, was my first job. Data people sat in the basement. And then I had the pleasure of introducing Mike Bloomberg to the data business when he came back from being mayor into the company. And we had to tell him, these data people now sit on a trading floor, right? And it is an incredible transition. When I think about where I thought I was going to be, I had no clue. All I knew is I was pretty good with numbers and they made sense to me. To find myself in a position where I understand an area in business that drives so much of just about everything that we do is a great privilege. I wish I could say I had a grand plan. I didn't. I just got lucky that my head works in numbers.
There's so much that's coming up for me listening to you, Kat. And I think when you talked about fear, we'll all have our experiences of fear in different moments. And sometimes we can anticipate it. Other times it kind of appears unannounced. And it's how you approach it, how you engage with it. Because I've always loved the acronyms FEAR, feel everything and rise, or false evidence appearing real. And sometimes fear can be paralyzing, but for others, I love the reframe, I'm here to be in service. And it's that switch that you were able to do that was able to be like, put fear in its rightful spot rather than let it have the driving seat.
Yeah. I think being able to reframe whatever situation you are in is incredibly important. Right. And sometimes it is sheer survival necessity that drives it. And sometimes it's, all right, I need to see the positive and the opportunity in this. I was talking to somebody the other day about the word problems and how problems has such a negative connotation. And if all of us could, instead of every time, things don't happen overnight, right? We build up habits. As you guys know, I love the gym. I love working out, right? We work our muscles. Our brain needs to be worked as well. So if we train it to think in a certain way, right? If you train, instead of saying the word problem, you start to say, look, it's a challenge and an opportunity, right? And at first it doesn't happen automatically, but the more you start doing it, and I often find, when I think about my teenagehood into early 20s, it was fraught with challenges, right? It was a really, really difficult period. And that gave me training ground for how to change the mindset from problem to challenge and opportunity. And I am so grateful that I had that. I think if I didn't have those challenges, I don't know if I'd be the person that I am today. I think, if I had, and again, just with kids, I want to give my kids a good life, yet I have to figure out how to teach them lessons,
I hear you.
And that's at times, especially during summer vacation, that could be an hourly challenge.
Yeah.
Tough love.
Tough love.
But it's,
well,
go
ahead.
So I think what you shared there is because words make worlds. And when we talk about problems, words have energy attached to them. And problems there's like a negative association, whereas challenge, opportunity, that's something to, challenge is something to overcome. And isn't it interesting, like just switching problem to challenge, how that's just a single word substitution. And and you said the word about mindset earlier, that can completely shift how you approach something, to like receptiveness, openness, to probably more, problem feels more, constricted. And so I love what you said there. And one of the things, just to circle back, which I thought was really important, and as well, you were talking about when you taught the calculus class, what really struck me as another lesson there for like leadership is about flex, because at the beginning, it's the being curious, right? Who's here to learn, who wants to understand the concepts, and who just wants to graduate. Rather than, and leaders, when you see leaders get it right, they're curious, that, it's about flex, whereas others are like, no, this is my approach, and everyone just has to adapt to that. But there's flexing to really get, understand what do different people need, and what is the desired outcome.
Yeah. And look, you can have fun with it. The second class that I taught, there's not going to be any great insight here. This is just a funny story. I realized again that my name really looked like I didn't speak English. And I decided to mess with the class. So I went and got some like 80s clothes from a thrift store, thick glasses so it looked like I can't see. And I walk in on the first day and I say, "Hello, my name is Katya. We will have quiz every day and it will count towards your fun." So I scared the crap out of them, right? And again, it sets a tone. And then when I came in the next time, it was normal. And I said, look, we are going to have a lot of quizzes, but it is really for you to be able to see where you are on your journey. Right. So I think there is a possibility to have fun with it, still be flexible, leverage the things that, that are core to you and natural to you, to poke a little fun at yourself and, get people comfortable. Even though that first moment was uncomfortable for everybody, the reality is afterwards there was a sigh of relief, but there was still a message of, hey, you know what, this spot checking and testing, it's important. I don't know. I love teaching. I really did.
I also think, and then I try to tell my kids this a lot. I'm not sure if it's sinking in, but at least I try, right? It's like if you want an easy life, you got to do the hard things early in life. If you want a hard life later on, then keep doing the easy things, right? Like that's just the reality. And I think it's a mindset thing. And one of the things that I also realize is, when I look at kids, their imagination and the way they think, everything is possible. Like when you see kids, like the art of the possibility. But yeah, when you see, as we become adults, like everything is a no. Oh wait, if I do this, it's a no. So what we end up doing is we're creating these predefined conclusions in our head, even before we start. And what we're doing is we're putting these limiting beliefs, and it's that hard balance, right? Where how could your point of problems, right? Problem are actually possibilities, right? It becomes a problem if you set it as a problem, but if you see it as a possibility, then you can change it like to the right outcome that you want. But it's that mindset, because we create these like predefined conclusions in our head, and that's hard to unwire, by the way.
The thing I was going to pick up on is anything is possible. That phrase came up the other day in a group of people. And what I was fascinated by is how different people can take that statement. There was a cohort that really lit up, where to them, anything is possible meant limitless opportunities for good and growth. And then there was a cohort who looked completely petrified, because to them, anything is possible means all the bad things that could happen. Right. And I was taken aback, because I firmly said, when you tell me anything is possible, I'm like unicorns and rainbows. Right. Yeah. And I am just so grateful that my mindset is that way, because it is such an easier. And again, going back to, was I born that way, or did I get that way through the experiences that I had? I probably got there through the experiences that I had, right? Like I said, when I was a little kid, everything scared me, the other thing that we talk about, the possibilities and the imagination, when you are faced with a challenge, one of the things and one of the skills that I have to practice till this day, like it is a daily and a continuous thought process that goes in my head, in terms of, if I have a challenge, what can I do about it? What is under my control and what isn't? Because what isn't, I can't do anything about. So then that problem, it's just going to be there, right? And I have to just accept it, and like, it's going to exist. But what can I do? And sometimes what I can do, the only thing I can do, is change how I look at a situation, right? Because sometimes we really are powerless over the stuff that's going on around us. And how do you not let any of that weigh you down or consume you, right? It is what it is, right? Or if you can take an action, then take it. Because if you don't, then that is going to become a nagging negative feeling. And like I said, for me, that's something that I actively have to watch for, right? Because life happens to all of us, right? Things happen day in and day out. And, we have kids, we know that what that is like, right? We have elderly parents, if we have them. We've had to deal with a lot of stuff. So stuff happens every day. So what is it that I can actually change in this situation? What can I control? Whatever I can't, I have to put it to the side and accept it.
Yeah, I think, life will life. Life is always going to give us the unknowns, and it's what we draw upon in those moments. And I think it's really important to underscore what you shared about, control what you can control, and catch yourself when you're ruminating or bleeding energy on the things that you just simply can't influence. And it's catching ourselves, because sometimes I think we're in that whirlwind of fear, worry, anxiety, whatever it is. And when we've got to catch ourselves and pull ourselves back from it. And I think over the last few years coming out of COVID, recognized the fragility of life. None of us have like a set path ahead. We can only do the best we can with the tools that we have. And we talked about gratitude as we were preparing for this, the importance of recognizing all the great things we have around us as well, because it's sometimes very easy in the world of busyness to overlook some of the gifts that we have around us.
Absolutely. And I think we live in a world of consumption and more and growth, right? And again, it is how you look at things, because growth can get you into, I don't have something, right? And that's starts to become a negative mindset. And again, not a healthy place to live.
And before we hear about your current business, we know you just talked about the healthy place, being in a healthy place. And I think for all leaders, mindset, well-being, physical health, how do you, well, again, the analogy I often use is like a Formula One car. Yes, it's about the car. Yes, it's about the engine, the pit crew, but ultimately it's the person in the seat. Are they fit for purpose? Can they drive that car to the best of their abilities? How do you make sure that that you stay fit for purpose as a leader?
You just made a big leap that I'm fit for purpose.
But looking at you and hearing, I mean, you sound energized and resilient. So whatever you're doing on the outer optics, it looks like it's working.
No, look, I do think it's one of the things I do every morning, and it's a recent, as in, I've been working close to 30 years. So, in the last 7 is a recent start. I don't look at my phone the first minute I wake up. And the reason why I don't is something is blowing up, right? We work with global teams. So no matter how early I wake up, and I am a morning person, somebody's already awake, right? And something would have happened. So I know if I look at my phone before I do anything else, my mind is going to go to, I got to put out a fire. So I don't look at my phone. And the other thing that I do is I have a little timer set for a brief meditation, right? And sometimes, I only have 3 minutes. Sometimes I have 5, on a good day, I might have 10, but it is 3, 5, or 10 minutes of just sitting and breathing and not having any noise or sound around me. I am grateful that I'm a morning person, because it means the kids and everybody else is asleep, even the dog. So there's nobody to bother me. And those 3 to 10 minutes are probably the most precious minutes of the day that I have, because it is to get everything out of me, get whatever energy I have out of me, and absorb the energy of the things that I need to do for the day. And really just start with a calm mindset. And then when I open up my email or I open up a Signal chat or whatever it is, I'm not in a panic state. I'm not in a state of, I need to put fires out. I'm in a state of, all right, what are going to be the challenges for the day, right? Is there anything overnight that happened that I need to look at? And if there is, what can I do about it? Who needs to be called? Who needs to be talked to? Having a structure for, these are things I'm going to do today. Those are always helpful. However, what I also make sure I don't do is, if I didn't get to everything in a day, it's okay. Do not beat yourself up over it, because that's not going to help anybody. It is okay that something potentially slips. Of course, there are things that are, hey, we have a deadline, we got to meet it, and all this stuff. So again, it's that flex thing that you mentioned before. Yes, there are some things that are hard deadlines, right? So those are the things that have to get done today. The other things that have flexibility to them, don't beat myself up if I don't get to do everything I had to do, because tomorrow's another day, right? The other thing that you bring up, COVID, I think what COVID has done for me, I had the typical New York schedule. I was at the gym at 5. I was in the office by 6:30. I didn't come home till 7 o'clock at night. I saw my kids for an hour at best. The ability to work from home here and there has given me the opportunity to actually see the people for whom I do the things that I do professionally. Right. And that to me has become an invaluable asset to my life. Because, they say the days are long, the years are short, right? The day to day with the kids. And again, I bring up kids because we're coming off vacation. So we got to see a lot of them. But so, the day to day can be hard sometimes. But the reality is, when you take a step back, we only have them at best for what, 17, 18 summers.
Oh, don't tell me that. I mean, sometimes we'll be like, yay, but I think other times it's like time goes so quickly, and we can, and where you just said there, it's sometimes it's saying it's okay. I think, when I say thing, I'm generalizing. I think many of us can beat ourselves up. I mean, how many of us finish our to-do list at the end of the day? It's like it's we don't, and giving ourselves permission to say, yeah, as you said, fixed, things that have a hard deadline. Yes, you need to meet those. Things that have flex, be okay. Like, it's okay.
Yeah. It's okay, I think, is a great phrase, and it rings through my head so many times during the day. Whatever it is, it's okay. Yeah. It's okay. So we spend a lot of our summer. I guess I spend a lot of time in general in the mountains, because I'm a crazy skier in the winter, and then in the summer I want the kids outside and not indoors, and so mountains are a great place for that. And what I love about being out there, people often say, oh, you like skiing because you're an adrenaline junkie. And I'm like, no, actually, being in and around nature that is so much bigger than you, right? Realizing that these things in front of you formed over millions and millions of years, or many years, right? Just makes you realize how short our time is. A time scale of this planet, right? And it is not a bad thing. It's a great thing, right? We should rejoice in every minute that we are actually present here, but not take ourselves too seriously. Because in the grand scheme of things, these things have withstood the millennia. We're only a tiny blip on that. So it serves as a good reminder of, You know, we got to occupy the space that we're given, know our boundaries, but also fill the space that we give. Um, and what I mean by fill the space that we give, really think about what can you add? How can you be of service? It goes back to that thing, like, how can you help? How can you grow into this space that you were given, right? Again, knowing your limitations, and limitations are not necessarily a bad thing. Limitations are things that question of what can you and can't you control, right? And what can you affect the change on and what you can't. So that to me is the limitation that I talk about there. By the way, I have no idea where that question started, and I realized I'm in, like, mountains have been around for millions of years.
Okay, look, that's how the show is. Yeah. I am curious though. So talk about climbing mountains, right? You spent a big part of your career climbing that corporate ladder. You end up running the data business for market access, right? That's a very high profile job, but yet you decide to walk away from that. Like, what was the mentality around that change?
So you called me.
Oh
Yeah. Look, somebody calling you is one thing. It's interesting. I texted somebody earlier today, and not everybody has the same risk profile, but I think what really drives that is the idea of wanting to create and build. I am a strong believer of being part of the creation process, and the areas that I've always sat within these large organizations have always been the areas for new business growth, like new product development. I worked very closely with the market when we first got into machine readable news, right? The idea that the machine can interpret text, right? That text can be data was so novel back in 2005, right? We started to build solutions for quants, right? Quant was not a thing. Again, these were the people who were in the dungeon, if all worked out well, I would have been an actuary, which, again, just looking back at it, I'm like, thank God I didn't become one. I think I'd be pretty bored sitting in a cubicle. So the idea of building new product and creating new product has always been part of my work journey. And I think you get to a point where this goes back to, I wasn't born with the guts to step out and do these crazy things. I think I had to get there. But the process of getting there were the things that really made the way I approach things and the way I approach problems an ingrained set of habits and actions. And I think when you build things over time, they're a lot sturdier than if you build something super quick. We see that with a lot of booms and busts in the technology cycle, right? Everybody gets hyped up over something, blah, blah, blah. It's the biggest thing. And it fizzles out. However, there are people who've been working on that problem for a lot longer than the start of the bubble. Those are the ones who I think tend to persist and become real titans of the industry, right? So it is persistence, it is repetition that really got me to a point of, I know I've had that feeling that I want to build and create, and the timing becomes right where you're like, I am ready now. When I look at my career journey, the first proper job, or the first job that I really kind of gravitate to, was when I ended up working as a business manager for FX deal and matching at Reuters. And this was right around the time where we decided that, hey, I think we can enable machines to trade. not just giving traders keypads, really starting to enable. And I was there as we started to think through, all right, what is the information that we need to provide the machine? How do we need to package that up? How do we commercialize that? Because we have an existing business and it's obviously this is going to lead into it. And so it was a statement and a challenge that we wanted to accept, and all the considerations that had to go into it were incredible. And like I said, I kind of sat within these big companies building new business lines, and I got to a point where I was like, look, I think I am ready to build something myself. And like I said, timing is everything. A kid says, you better be lucky than good. To me, they're kind of one and the same. Kid called at the right time, right? If he would have called 5 years earlier, I probably would not have been in a place where I was ready, where I had enough experience, where genuinely my gut was like, okay, you got to build your own. And so I think it's a combination of the drive for creation and being part of the creation process, and then the process of learning and getting to the point of I am ready. Most people will say, oh, you take chances when you're young before you have a family. So, I decided to jump into a startup world when I'm like in a thick of family. But I think it is the thing that we talked about of overcoming fears, and right, for most people, this would have created a tremendous amount of fear. And all I had was faith in, you know what, it's going to work out. I don't know how, I don't know, but I think there are things that I can do to affect this thing. There are things that I can change. There are things that I can impact. And I think we can create something that's really good and needed in the industry. The other thing is, I spent a large part of my career in sales. I cannot sell something I don't believe in. So I'm not one of those people, when they do the interview of sell me this pen, right? That's not me. I'm like, I really have to believe it in my heart of hearts. You can have a 6-course meal, and the way I love food, I will make you hungry, right? Same thing about data. Like, I happen to be passionate about data and what it can and can't do for the world as a whole. Right. So for me, this is a natural place because, again, it comes from here. I genuinely love what I do. And it took me time to get there. Right. Looking at my friends who are trying all these fancy jobs, and I'm like, I love data. It didn't sound super cool.
And when you talked about, when Kit made the call, you were ready, and it's about having, people having a risk profile. It's interesting because I've seen many people who would love to set up themselves. They are creators, they're disruptors, and yet there's this that we talked about, fear. They've got job security, they've got reputational capital. If they came to you, and said, look, I'm thinking about setting up my own business, and yet I've got all the security around me that's trying to pull me back. What advice would you give them?
So I'm going to go with the practical. If you have had a good career, chances are you have capital, right? Whatever you've done, set up something that can generate income, right? Not a lot, but generate income. And then stop keeping up with the Joneses, right? Somebody is always going to have more money. Because that gets you to a place where, okay, I can take on this risk. I can take on not having as much for a period of time because I believe in this thing. So that's the practical side of it, right? Not all of it is gut feels and energy, right? There are very practical things. So if you have been diligent about your investments, how you manage your finances and money, if you're somebody who has had a good career, you're going to be in a good place, right? The not keeping up with the Joneses, I think, is a really important one because, you know what? There's always going to be a nicer car. There's always going to be a nicer this. So having less attachment to things is really important, because things are not important, right? And then you just have to, once you make a decision, just stick with it. Like, don't second guess yourself. Don't go back. "Oh, why did I do this?" There is nothing probably more guaranteed to get you into a bad spot if you start second guessing yourself, right? Once you make a decision, the decision is made. Now, that is not to say that you made a decision, right? And Kit and I, as we started getting peer data up and off the ground, we had to take a step back plenty of times and think about, does this thesis still hold? What do we need to pivot based on what we're hearing back from customers? It's not the blind, this is what I believe, and this is where I'm going to go, and this is all I'm going to do. No, it's that flexibility again, and the acceptance. You know what? We maybe made the wrong decision here. We need to fix it. All right, let's fix it. So the long-term goal holds, but the day-to-day decisions can be reviewed to see where you potentially made mistakes. Because let me tell you, guess what? We make mistakes. I tell kids all the time, I'm like, mistakes are great. It means you're trying something new. When mistakes become bad is when you make the same one over and over again. When you do something wrong, you're not in trouble. What I want you to do is tell me, what are you going to do different next time? And then show me that you're going to do it different next time. Because if it's the same thing over and over again, then you get in trouble, right? Because it means you're not learning. So it is that your conviction with an accurate self-appraisal as to where you are and how potentially the market has changed. We wanted to launch data as an investable asset class day one. We realized that there were fundamental infrastructural difficulties in the data market that needed to be addressed before we can get the investment community comfortable with the asset and how it is reported, tracked, and the transparency that we can bring to this asset class. We've worked on creation and supporting of new asset classes before, and here is one that's natively digital, yet the tooling around it is still like, some people still have their contracts in a filing cabinet, 2025. A SharePoint is not a true understanding of the assets that you have. So we had to take a step back, and we said, all right, let's build the ecosystem for this market that can lend itself well to creating an instrument that you can then invest in. So the longer term vision still holds. It's just the things that we had to do in order to get there. We were informed about that based on conversations that we had.
I also like to add, Georgie, we always have like a false sense of security. Because I know a lot of people where, hey, they work at their firm, now they're laid off, they're gone, right? There's a video of someone working at Microsoft for 22 years, right? Like, just because you have a job doesn't mean it's guaranteed safety.
True.
As we become more established, to Kat's point, we have more capital. Well, why not invest in ourselves? The question I always ask is, if you cannot fail, how big would you go? I would actually ask the other question, that is, are you risking by not taking the opportunity to be the best self you can be? The risk is actually not taking action. The risk is not about, leaving a comfortable job, right? And to the point Kaz made, look, we're only on this earth a very short period of time, right? So for me, it's not to-do list, it's to-achieve list. What is my to-achieve list I want to tackle? And when you think about perspective, where, and I think Steve Jobs said it best, where you look around the world, think of all things that are created, they're created by people no smarter than you and I, right? But they have the mindset to realize that they're going to take the action to make it happen. Right.
And I think that's so important. It's the taking action. Everyone can have great ideas. And when I wrote the book on founder CEOs, in fintech that created these extraordinary growth stories, it's all about, yes, you can have a great strategy, but it has to be matched by the execution. And that's the same for our own personal careers. We can desire success, but we've actually got to put ourselves out there and exercise some courage as well.
Yeah. Most definitely.
And I would love to know, with peer data, what would you want people to know? Like, if you could share, like, what are the key aspects of the business that you feel that it would be important to share today?
I briefly touched upon the initial idea. The conversation went something like, "Hey, Kat, I want to start a data company. You're in." And I said, "I'm in. Let's just talk about what we mean by a data company." The longer term vision of data being an investable asset class, right? If we draw parallels to any other commodity that's out there, right? You can invest in it. If you're going to need dollars, you're going to have, or yen, right? There's hedging opportunities for you to invest in that. Everybody now needs data. Data costs money. The costs for it do not go down. So the idea of really creating this as an investable asset class still holds. However, what we stumbled upon as the challenge and why that hasn't really been able to materialize previously is the fact that it still is largely a paper business. And what I mean by that is the terms and conditions that govern any data transaction. And what I mean by that is, party A giving data to party B, today sits somewhere away from the actual exchange, right? It could be a standard vendor subscriber contract. It could be, for example, when I was at Market Access, a lot of the information that we use to create our data products, what we could do with customer participation data set and the agreements for the trading platform, right? So they sat somewhere else. And so now you have an exchange of services or goods that's completely decoupled from the terms and conditions, right? If you take this to retail, the idea that this supply chain is not tracked, that is the challenge that we're trying to solve, right? You got to know what data you have, what you can and can't do with it, and what are your commercial rights and obligations. If you think about Amazon, the success of Amazon is the logistics stuff on the back end, but the way you start to get people to participate in Amazon, Shopify had to be created, right? So the tools that we've built are the tools that are the Shopify tooling for the data business. At its very core, it is looking at data contracts and digitizing and classifying them, right? Because licensing data is not the same as selling a widget, right? It's nebulous, it's oftentimes intangible, and it's out there. And us being part of the problem, I'll admit, Kiet often says we are recovering data vendors, but we've come up with creative ways how to license data, right? You never really sell it, you license it. You give somebody a temporary set of rights to do something with a piece of data. So the language is not core standard. However, there are more or less general practices across the industry that are known. So at our core, we start with that. We start with how do you truly digitize what you can and can't do with the data. Then identifying what data you have is actually really difficult. One of my most memorable college courses was multidimensional calculus, and I had this amazing teacher who he looked like Bob Ross from the hair perspective, and he actually talked like him. And he came in first day and he put a period on a blackboard, and he's like, does this point have an address and a definition? And we're like, I don't know, it's a dot on the blackboard. And then he starts drawing in the axis. He's like, now we're starting to define it. We're giving it context. Then he put in a third axis. And then we went into dimensions that, I think not part of this podcast. But the whole idea that a piece of data in isolation doesn't have context was really ingrained in my head then, right? You need to understand, what is this number or word trying to describe, right? The word no has a negative connotation in isolation. You put it in a sentence, it can actually start to derive a positive connotation depending on where it sits. Same thing with a number. Number 10 has no specific meaning to anybody unless you start to say, what question does this number start to answer? On a scale of 1 through 10, you still need to know whether 10 is good or 10 is bad, right? So the idea of having a clear classification and definition of what is the data describing, what is the context for the data, that is the other problem that we've solved, right? And it's really important. So now what is the information that I have described, like what questions can it answer for me, and how can I use it to solve my business challenges, right? And business challenges can be very broad. And then the final leg of the solving this ecosystem is really being able to trace the data as it's being used through all the processes. We call that observability for those people who understand, but it is being able to observe and get to end-to-end traceability of data to really understand how it flows through processes. And, with all the AI talks that are important, people talk about the thing that's important is, first of all, energy, second of all is compute, but the third ingredient is data. And being able to trace and understand what is going into a model that creates an output. That output really having the, what were my building blocks that I used to build this output is important. It's important from the people who provide the data. There's questions around IP rights for data as it comes to training models. There's a very clear set of contractual rules in terms of what you can and can't do with that piece of data, right? So it is the connecting those terms and conditions to the AI models and everything else that's being done. Because right now it is being done, right? That's like everybody setting budget aside for AI strategies. AI strategy starts with knowing your data. And knowing your data means you understand what data you have and what you can and can't do with it. And the last piece is, how much is it going to cost me? The CFOs tend to care, or COOs as well tend to care about that one a lot. So hopefully that clears it up.
And where do you as a business hope to be 2 years, 5 years from now? Like, what does success look like?
Look, success is we are synonymous with AI projects. We are synonymous with investment in data. And we are synonymous in the data ecosystem for moving data back and forth across organizations, right? We know that there is a tremendous amount of investment that has been done into the existing processes. It's kind of, we took a page from the asset management world because we started to look at parallels between asset management and the data ecosystem. And you had portfolio management systems, risk systems, OMS, EMS, fund accounting, all those things. They did a part of a process in the life cycle of an asset. However, at the end of the day, you still need a concept of an investment book of record that brings all of the information from all of those systems together and lays it out neatly for you to be able to have true visibility into the real-time performance of an asset, right? Same thing happened with data. Systems were built to do a thing as part of the overall data lifecycle, but now there is a need to have a data book of record, a DBOR concept. And that's actually what we call the system under PR data is DBOR, data book of record. Because there's going to be things that we do for our customers. There's going to be customers for whom we are just an integration layer of all the systems that they already have that don't speak to each other. And we bring them together into a single view and a way to make the system function and talk to all the different components. Again, going back to being able to have that end-to-end traceability of how data travels across your organization.
And I'm curious, you work with Kiet. Like, what's it like to work with?
Do you have to ask that? Can you go on mute from me talking? Look, Kiet is relentless. And that is one of probably the most admirable qualities. He absolutely exhibits there's no limitations. We got to think outside whatever lines have been drawn. He embodies that, and that's inspirational. He sometimes needs a dose of reality, but I think what he knows is he needs to surround himself with people who do give him the things that he doesn't have. I think he is a true visionary, and somebody who has been able to bring tremendous teams together to achieve amazing results and build new things. So, and he is a pain in the butt, but but all of those qualities exist.
Bobby, I'll pay you the tip later after this. No, look, the reality is, you bring amazing people together. I'm like, look, I'm a co-founder, but I'm sitting here, I'm like, where do I sign just listening to Kat talk, right? And hence why Kat's the CEO of Peer Data. It makes a lot of sense. So.
And look, we always like to do very quick fire before we close out, and there's no right or wrong. There is no competition, and it's just one word or several words as the response. Okay, we'll probably have 5 questions here because looking at time. Okay, number 1, a leader you admire.
Mike Bloomberg.
I see. Now I want to ask more questions, but I'm not allowed to do that because it's not the rules in this. A quality you most value in others.
Honesty.
Your go-to drink in a coffee shop.
Don't ruin a good thing. Black cup of coffee.
You did allude to this earlier. Early bird or night owl?
Early bird.
Yeah, me too. Email or phone call if we need to get your attention?
Phone call.
Cool. One thing you can't work without?
Oh my gosh, a computer. Yeah. I need a medium. Actually, I like keyboards. So I don't like typing on the phone like that.
Best Netflix series you've watched or Apple show?
That one I have. Slow Horses, hands down. I agree. About a master of his craft. Gary Oldman gives a master class every minute he's on camera, and the new season is coming out at the end of September, I think.
Okay, my husband,
Apple.
I've not seen it, and he watched it on his own. I clearly need to watch this one then.
You need to watch it.
Kit, what's one question you would ask Kat as we close?
Actually, I'm sorry.
I'm putting you on the spot.
No, I can't think of any. Look, I think there's been a great conversation. It's quite insightful. A lot of the discussions we've had. I guess the question is, if peer data can't fail and is limitless, like, where do you see peer data in 5 years, 10 years?
We already had that question. Look, the reality is data is growing in importance. I think we become the operating system for the data market, and I am borrowing the operating system of something from other places and other people I have admired. Actually, where I got that idea from, and I'm going to give credit where credit is due, is Eric, who's the CEO of Adapar. I worked with him when I was at Thomson Reuters, and he was at Palantir at the time. Amazing individual, had a great vision, and his thing was, operating system for wealth management. So it was not an original, but I do think if peer data becomes the operating system for data, it is a place that helps you identify and know what data you have easily, and it is the thing that tracks data across the entire world and ecosystem. I don't know if that's a 5-year plan. That's probably a little longer. I think we will usher in a different way of being able to license data and how data rights are tracked and captured and exchanged. And then access and discovery of data becomes seamless. And if you know your data costs are going to go up, you're going to have an ability to invest in it because you're going to buy it.
So, well, Georgie, Kat, that was a great conversation as always. I also want to appreciate and thank the audience. We always get extremely positive feedback, and the show keeps going, continues because of the continued support we're getting from the audience. So thank you, everybody. Thank you, Georgie. Thank you, Kat. Till next time.
Thanks, Kat. Thank you, and thanks.
It was a pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Thank